Oh, welcome to our last sample video of the CI process. We've gone ahead and go on with the overview of the CI process, explaining how to do the assignment. And then on the last video, we went ahead and showed how to go ahead and do a CI using a single article. Now, for the most difficult part of the CI process, and one that everybody will get to eventually, and that is reading two articles or more for creating a CI. And the challenge is, of course, is trying to spot the commonalities between the two articles to create a theme. So it's not going to be right out front like it would be with the single article. So if you look here, our first article that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to go through in a more abbreviated fashion than even we did with the single article on how to kind of look for where are the common themes between articles. But once again, what we're going to focus on is the title first. So you can see low empathy related to bullying, okay? So we know that they're going to go ahead and try to do that. And so we know empathy and bullying are somehow involved, and then there's some sort of social background variables that a bunch of these are looking at. Okay, so next, right down to the abstract, you can go ahead and skim along here, and you can see relationship of low empathy and bullying. So that's obviously an important little part here. I'm skimming along. I'm seeing the relationship prevalence of bullying, frequency type. See now the questionnaires, this is something that a lot of students will get tripped up in and looking in too much detail, especially when they're putting it into their expansion. You don't need to do all of that. But what I'm going to do is skim on and say, okay, no evidence that low cognitive empathy was independently related to bullying. Okay, so that's important to kind of note right now. And we see, but high impulsivity was related to all forms of male bullying and to female bullying. Okay, good. All right, so now we know what the two main findings are. But we're probably not going to be able to just stay there like we were with Article 1. We're going to have to look a little more in depth. In particular, reading the intro can help to give us a basis of what they are looking at. And so if you're unfamiliar with the topic area, I highly recommend going ahead and reading the intro because it'll get you up to speed on a particular topic. Next, you're going to go ahead and get into the research questions and method. While it's very important to know about these things, it isn't for the CI. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of skim through those. And then the results, once again, the results I'm not really going to pay a lot of attention to because they'll get into that in the discussion. With the exception of occasionally, I will look at some of the tables that they have here. So here you have the prevalence and frequency of bullying that occurred in the study. And then I'm going to go ahead and go on down and down and down. Quite a bit of findings here. Here it is. This is the kind of key area is the discussion. So when I'm looking at the discussion, it's going to go ahead and summarize the big findings here. And so here it is. Considerable males and males had low empathy. It was particularly the case with affective empathy. Okay, that's a pretty big finding. That's why they put it first in the discussion. And here, males who had lower cognitive and affective empathy than those who did not bully, and this difference was significant when frequent bullying was examined. Okay, so I know that these are probably two of the big takeaways. So I'm going to read through the rest of the discussion and look for other details, but those are the two I'm going to be focusing on here. So I went ahead and I got through there. Okay, these are the references. So that's the first article. Now I need to move on to the second article. And as you can see here, it says unique and interactive effects, effects here of empathy and social status. Okay, so what I am going to, let's see here. No, my little highlighter's not working for a second. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just go ahead and kind of overview here. So once again, we have the effects of empathy and social status on involvement in bullying. So there we have your empathy here. Now it's not highlighting on this PDF too well. So we'll just say we have empathy here, and then we also have bullying here. So that we have in common. So we know already that the theme is probably going to involve empathy and bullying, but we want to be a little more specific than that. So let's see if we can't get a little more detail. Okay, so this study is looking at affective and cognitive empathy. Now that affective empathy sounds very familiar, and that's because it is. It's back here when they were talking about cognitive empathy. And then as we go down all the way down to the discussion, it was in part of that we highlighted here about, once again, cognitive and affective empathy. So we know we have specific types of empathy that we might be able to refer to in the actual theme. Okay, once again, more research methods and who participated, not really as important. And then as we get in here, the results highlight the importance of studying child by environment models, in this case where affective empathy and defending behavior was stronger among boys who had a high status in the group. Okay, so now we have a pretty good idea of the commonalities between these two articles. I'm going to engage in the same process, maybe looking at the intro a little bit, getting a little more detail about the topic if I'm unfamiliar with it. And then I'm going to keep on trucking past the method and results sections, not paying as much attention to those, and so I can get to finally the discussion here. And so once again, confirm that cognitive affective components of empathy represent two distinct constructs. Social status of the child is clearly linked to bullying related behaviors. So now I think I do have some common themes there, and I'll go ahead and read the rest of the discussion section in a little more detail, just really trying to flesh out what those commonalities are. Now, once I've done that, I'm going to be ready for the CI. Okay, so I'm bringing my CI on over here. Go ahead and expand that so everybody can see that pretty well. So let's go ahead and blow that up. Okay, and so next, what is a good theme? Now the theme's going to be harder because we had to go ahead and integrate two articles. So the theme that I came up with, this one right here, is empathy has a major impact on bullying and statistically lower levels of affective empathy is seen in male bullies. Both of those articles talked about that, and it was a main focus. So there's a common theme between there. Now notice it didn't cover the main theme of one individual article, even though they may have had more specific findings, because you had to have the commonality between the two, and that's what you focus on in this CI process. Next, let's go ahead and look at our expansion. And so in the expansion here, what I'm going to do is go ahead and talk in a little more detail where it says the two different studies sought to compare bullies as well as bystanders with empathy levels and if there was any direct correlation between these two things. They also got more specific about the different kinds of empathy and which, if either, affected bullying more. They compared different forms of bullying, like violent and indirect, with those kinds of empathy as well as gender, to discover if there was a correlation between these things. They found that certain kinds of empathy affect certain genders more than the other, as well as other factors like socioeconomic and social status. So you can see there we did quite a bit of expansion, still looking at some of the commonalities that each of the articles had. It's okay if you have some more specifics on one article that's related to the theme, and you can go ahead and put that there. Just don't do that in the theme portion. Now, as far as an example, your examples in the first one that we did with one article was a bit more lengthy, and just to show you can actually have shorter examples too. So a girl with less of the ability to feel another's pain, or in other words, lower affective empathy, and who has a higher social status picked on another girl several times a week who is of a lower social rank. It's a perfect example of what they're talking about in regards to cognitive and emotional empathy. Okay, and then the last thing, of course, is our analogy. And so our analogy, remember, you always want to have the analogy related to the type of theme that you had stated earlier. And so what I came up with is a lion, an animal of higher dominance, does not feel bad for a lamb whose social rank is much weaker and therefore preys upon the lamb. Now that is a good analogy for empathy having a major impact on bullying. In this case, the aggression for the lion over something that's less powerful, like the lamb. Okay, so it's a lot trickier to do more than one article. So I want you to just kind of have that sense and how to go about looking at those things. And that's going to go ahead and conclude our example of two articles.